Hello, everybody. As you're still coming in, nice to see up towards nearly 60. Okay, transport in the time of COVID, update 7th of December 2021. Right, we weren't here last week, so quite a few things have been happening since we last met. So I'll be whipping through them. So usual, do email me with stuff or DM me on Twitter, and do go to this site for seeing previous issues on YouTube. And if you want slides, email me. Right here, nice graphic from Cycling UK, 6 reasons why we need cycle lanes. So, do grab hold of that if you feel like it. Right. This is from UK government publishing the Union Connectivity Review. And the big thing is here, forecast increase in road traffic volumes of up to 51% by 2050 compared to 2015 volumes. So that's the usual predict and provide stuff. That's if we carry on like we are, there'll be a 50% increase in road traffic volumes by 2050. So we have to work against that. Nice article here, e-bikes and their capability to reduce car CO2 emissions. You can see Professor Gillian Annable, who's been a big academic pushing for the use of e-bikes in rural areas and over areas outside the congested urban type areas, and because of the very big need to reduce CO2 emissions from motor vehicles and the need to reduce the amount of motor vehicular traffic. So do take a look at that. Professor Glenn Lyons has looked at the Ipsos Mori Issues Index, and this is about what people are worried about, concerned about, and he points out that pollution, environment, climate change has made it to top, and that hasn't been the case for a while. So it's definitely something that people are concerned about, above COVID and Brexit and the NHS and the economy. So that's important. I did talk about this at the time of COP, just a few COP26 aftermath things. We have talked about the declaration, which was all about EVs, with just a little bit down there put in on active travel and public transport. But what I also wanted to mention is that some of the world's leading car manufacturers signed the declaration, but Volkswagen, Toyota, Renault, Nissan, Hyundai, Kia refused to sign. So even that is something which they, some vehicle manufacturers are not signing. They're still producing internal combustion engines and want to carry on doing that. Here's the reading list from COP26 and the various things that you should read about how it didn't deliver on transport as well as generally. I've been talking about the work that Roger Geffen for Coalition of Active Travel Groups and Pacts has been doing in terms of the discussions about road traffic law. There was a debate in Westminster Hall, which I've talked about, and this is a blog spot which you should read by Roger Geffen about road injustice, very important for us. Yes, a lot of victim blaming about. This is from Break Road Safety Week. This is a school in Bolton. It's a kind of like I surrender, isn't it? Saying thank you to a firm of contractors who have a fleet of vans who donated high-vis to the local school kids because it's their responsibility to not be run over. And the victim blaming from Road Safety Week carries on. This is the usual Reach, part of the Reach Empire, Yorkshire Times, something just copying a press release from Break about how winter cycling is dangerous and you shouldn't, you have to do various things. And it's, well, you can read it yourself. Okay, and the big bad story about just sort of republishing a press release was the demonizing of cycle lanes in today's Evening Standard. I tweeted about this, and Simon has demolished it on the Vanessa Feltz program. So you can see those links there. Carlton Reed's written some good stuff on it, Elizabeth Anderson and others. Basically, it's a sort of data analytics company which produces a report every year on how it's trying to squeeze more juice out of the system, build capacity, make life easier for motorists, get more motorists in there. And it's all the fault of cycle lanes that are not working. And surprise, surprise, they're owned by a subsidiary of Porsche. Some character just basically regurgitated their stuff. Did get some quite good quotes from Duncan Dollymore of Cycling UK at the end of the piece, but of course people don't read to the end necessarily, they just read the basic headline, and if it backs up their prejudices, that's it. So I don't think Ross Lydall would have done that, and Evening Standard's done badly there. Also the BBC, which again regurgitated this, so do get out there complaining if you've got nothing else to do. I mean, I know you have lots of other things to do, but a bit of complaining could be helpful. As it was in this next case, and this is the victim blaming for quite a while. This is the kind of really big story since we last met. Dreadful campaign from TfL, see their side. Now, I'm not going to actually go into the whole history of it, but it's one of these things which was actually so disastrous that I think it could be quite positive, because it's the second time that TfL have really got the wrong messaging out, asking people who are clobbered by motorists to see the other side's point of view, and this is something that needs to be done, while they're claiming that they're following a road danger reduction agenda. Now, so many people piled in on this, a lot of them very wittily, all generally very polite, well-phrased arguments, very thorough work, 70 complaints to the Advertising Standards Authority, that I think, it could be the case that TfL people who have now paused the campaign, although not stopped it altogether, as we would have liked to have seen, are saying, maybe we're getting things wrong and we need to do things in terms of our messaging differently. So I've reached out to Will Norman and TfL about explaining what road danger reduction is about. Other people have made their complaints, and I do hope this leads to a positive alternative way of doing things in the future. So, I think there is that potential positive result from such a bad campaign. And I wouldn't have said that 15, 20 years ago, when nobody would have really made such a fuss about it. Okay, another story. Okay, it's not strictly speaking active travel, but it is related to it, particularly if you don't want to get run over. A report about how older drivers were going to be allowed to drive through red traffic signals to get away with it. This is the report from the Older Drivers Task Force. Carlton Reed pointed out that actually it's not the case, it's more complicated than that. However, while Carlton has pointed out that it's the usual story of sort of manipulating a press release, in fact, this report is actually quite bad. It's basically there to get more older people driving for longer, and they tack on something about safety at the end, but they don't want any controls, don't want retesting, don't want more law enforcement. So basically, in a sense, bearing in mind that most of the time someone drives through a red traffic signal, they won't be caught anyway, it is, in fact, I think, giving a bit of a carte blanche to elderly drivers who pose a threat to other road users. And I've written about this before there, if you want to see what I think about what the older driving people are on about. Okay, qualities page. It's a nice letter in Camden New Journal, making Camden safer for women. Cycling helps us to feel free and independent. So do have a look at that. Okay, the reading list. This is new about the boost to the economy from promoting cycling. I'm doing some blast from the pasts. This is an article in LTT pointing out to a debate 26 years ago saying that there could be no further growth in transport. And that just shows how long we've been saying the same sort of thing. An article on why there isn't enough being done about mobile phone use. And don't forget the Will South article I've had up for a few weeks. This is new. Are active travel schemes a vote winner? Potentially, yes. Another blast from the past is an interesting little cartoon from these people in the early 60s who were doing some quite interesting car critical stuff back in the day. Okay, your roundup from around the place. In the UK, yes, it was a row over a supposedly too wide cycle lane, the A3049 Wollaston Road. And what was interesting about that is it was defended by the Conservative administration. So that's a bit of good news there from Bournemouth and Poole. Not good news from Oxfordshire. Botley Road looks like that. They've had to put up a notice because of cyclists being clobbered. Look at that give way sign there. What's that about? Telling cyclists to slow down. That's not the way you should engineer things at a junction. So bad Oxfordshire. Graham Paul Smith will be on the case there. Suffolk. This is saying that a lot of pop-up stuff is being taken out, not Ipswich, but actually it's not as bad as it looks. Some ones are being taken out, but not all those that were originally implemented as pop-up under gear change. Right, this is what Mark was talking about before, the UK capability funding. 15 councils were told to assure the DFT that they were going to go ahead with road space reallocation as in gear change. Here they all are. Brighton and Hove, we've talked about, they've had a 25% cut. Cambridgeshire, Peterborough, a reassurance has apparently been given. I don't know about any of the others. If anybody wants to tell us who has knowledge, do tell me and Mark, of course. Now in London, yes, new data showing traffic down around the Homerton low traffic neighbourhood, and the low traffic neighbourhood there has been made permanent. Goody. Havering, on the other hand, have decided to end the experimental scheme on Winster Way, which hadn't even run for the initial 6 months objections period. And better hit streets for Havering say, if Councillor White's administration can't even deal with one residential street, we cannot see how serious it can ever be in transport and indeed the climate emergency. There's a consultation for those of you who go through Westminster. I think that's still open on various things that were put in under gear change road space reallocation. So if you ever ride through Westminster, Hyde Park and whatever, do respond to that consultation there. Right, now here's a nice graphic from TfL. This is Blackfriars Bridge going from 2000 to 2020. This is cars and taxis in light blue. As you can see, steady decline. right the way down there. And of course, 2020, it's actually gone down below bicycles, just below. In 2000, the average daily flow was 50,000 cars and 1,100 bikes. In 2020, it was 8,900 bikes and 8,800 cars and taxis. And a protected cycleway went in 2016. So a bit of a nice graphic showing what can be done. Still look at that, where all the cycleways, that's a bit of monitoring done by London Cycling Campaign, which does point out all the gaps. Also in London, yeah, Hammersmith Gyratory work started from 6th of December. And at the same time, it's rather unusual, the market just next to Hammersmith Gyratory is now being designated a zero emissions market in terms of how goods get to that little market there. In Haringey, officers recommend all 3 proposed LTNs go ahead. I don't know if that did go ahead or will go. Sorry, that's today, so we don't know. Well, let's hope for the best there. Hammersmith and Fulham again. The council recommends making South Fulham filtered traffic area permanent. Residents now seem to like it. Traffic reduced, but buses are fast. That's sort of motor traffic reduced. Sorry about that. There we go. That was on the agenda for the cabinet yesterday. I don't know what the result was. Camden, yes. Now there's Camden site. This is the counters showing big increases in numbers cycling on Camden's growing network of protected cycle routes here. It does need a bit of sort of careful analysis, because you have to, as with everything else, you have to look at the influence of COVID, what did it do with local commuting journeys, etc., etc. The Hampstead Road scheme is continuing as an experiment. I'm not quite sure what that means. It looks like, you know, there may have been some problems there, why it's still carrying on only as experimental, with experimental status, but that's what it is. If anybody knows any more about that, do say. Hounslow, yes, one Chiswick, the anti-low traffic neighbourhood, has withdrawn the cycleway 9 legal challenge. Good news there. Now here's something from Waltham Forest, more figures. The suggestion is more weekday commuting in 2021. 2021 is that green figure, and it's showing the average as being higher than 2020, that one there, and a lot higher than the previous 4 years. So nice graphic there from Waltham Forest. That's the weekday figures. They also did a graphic for weekends. Don't forget, there's been a lot of leisure cycling over weekends during the COVID period. Yes, there's a consultation on Whitechapel Road improvements, and Mark Philpotts is worried about that. So do have a look at that, and no doubt the Tower Hamlets Wheelers and others can give their impressions. And there is a graphic from a bus in York showing what you need to do about avoiding close passing of cyclists. So that's nice to see. And finally, going abroad for a bit, there we go in Amsterdam. So there's a nice graphic for us. Right, so anything that anybody wants to say about what I've got right or wrong?
I think Mark's got his hand up, Bob. 3 points of order.
I just wanted to clarify what Bob was talking about, the funding. That was, so 4 months ago, the government put out a statement on the Capability Fund, which is a revenue fund for things like bikeability training and encouragement and so on. And that's the way in which they signalled their concern about those councils that are under. So they were listed as funding suspended, seeking assurances. So that's what went out, and Gilligan tweeted that at the time and said, we've suspended. I was talking about this with Simon yesterday, which prompted it all. Gilligan put out a tweet saying, we've cut funding to Liverpool, Brighton and West Sussex, which was true, but there was these other 12 as well. So the problem is that no one has said whether they've got any assurances and what those assurances are and what they might be and what the DfT might want to see, except for Brighton, where we know it's been, and I just know that being local, where we know that they've been sort of half reassured, quarter reassured, so they've got a 25% cut. Cambridge and Peterborough, where they've given, the new mayor has come in and said, yes, I'm doing things differently, and that's all fine. There's a freedom of information outstanding for Gloucestershire, and all the rest we have absolutely no idea. Somebody must know what the government, what the DfT, what the insurances they wanted, and what the answers the council gave them were, and that includes West Sussex. So, if anyone lives in those areas, a freedom of information might not be a bad idea. Request might not be a bad idea, or a dig to find out. And then none of this relates to the Active Travel Fund, which was at, the bids went in on the 6th of August. So that's now however many months ago that is, 4 months ago. And it's all vanished into some black hole at the DfT, and we've got no idea. No one would be surprised if they made the announcement tomorrow, and no one would be surprised if they didn't make the announcement for another 2 months. It's just completely opaque about what's happening. And that's my gripe, is that there's just no process, no sign of Active Travel England. It's all very vague. Other people may know better, or may know better and not be able to say even. But
thanks for that, Mark. Oh, always juicy your bits. I never know what to edit them.
Well, that was more of a rant than a bit. That was just a rant about opaqueness and transparency. But what do we expect from the government?
What indeed? Oh, you muted yourself there. David, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I just thought it'd be useful to note that Adam Tranter has been appointed as Active Travel Commissioner across the West Midlands. So I think that's a really good appointment, and hope to take things forward as a result.
Oh yeah, that missed out on the news page, Bob.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought everybody knew that.
No, well done to Adam. He's brilliant, isn't he? Simon?
Yeah, I was just going to say, the guy from INRIX, as I think Ruth might have pointed out, has now rode back on his own quotes to the press. So that whole cycle lanes cause congestion thing, that's been, I think, pretty much comprehensively debunked. And please, Bob or everyone, just dig out the Hammersmith and Fulham results. They're absolutely cracking. So the survey prior to for the consultation prior to the scheme going in was quite significantly against the scheme going in. It's an area wide, it's a kind of LTN with cameras, but resident exemptions and all sorts. But there was a lot of opposition beforehand, and then after the scheme's been in now, it's like 90% in favour or something. So it was just a lovely turnaround to see. Once people experience these kind of schemes, they quite like them, really, which goes alongside the research that Possible did a while ago on long-term residents of LTNs. So I thought that was good.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, great news indeed. Yeah, Dean and George.
Hello. Just to clarify the point that Bob raised about Hampstead Road, which it's actually a TfL managed road, not a Camden road, and they have had it with a temporary, quite wide temporary track, under a temporary traffic order. And it's actually mixed up with the HS2. It goes through a lot of roadworks that are being done by HS2. Anyway, something we learned, I suppose, was that you can't have two temporary traffic orders in sequence, but you can have a temporary traffic order followed by an experimental traffic order. And they've just done that because I guess it's justifiable in that the uncertainty coming from HS2 makes it difficult to do anything permanent, really. So that's all. The other thing I was going to say is that nice letter that Bob mentioned in the Camden New Journal about women feeling free in Camden now that they've got quite a lot of cycle tracks was prompted by Jean with quite a few other cyclists joining in. That's all.
Brilliant. More good news from Camden. Keep up the good work. Still Camden for life. Honestly, I'll bring Dave.
Unmuted. Yeah, I just wonder whether he's tracking Urbit. They're just appeared in Glasgow, ramping up with cargo bikes. They're going into cities, France and UK, with the B Corporation, is it? And they seem to be taking most of the yodel traffic away from the vans in cities. So I don't know whether we're seeing an increasing number of cargo bikes from more responsible operators, because I think Urbit employ people, Zedify employ people. They're not gig economy.
Yeah, well, that's almost like worth a bit of a deep dive, that one, isn't it? In fact, because there's been a lot moving in the cargo bike world.
I think one other thing, Brian, is the Manchester campaign, whether you're up to speed with this, about these advertising pillars that go in and block view. And Andrea had a case where we consider it a causal factor in a fatality. They occupy 2 meters of footway width and block foot traffic. A lot of the cycle hires actually occupy nearly 3 meters of footway width because they're at 90 degrees to the curb. I can see this being a bit of a problem when we're starting to put cycle hire points out, and yet the cycles take up a huge chunk of footway.
Trying to put them on the carriageway wherever possible. That's certainly my strong recommendation. I'll bring in Lee.
Yeah, cheers, Brian. Sorry, I just wanted to do a shameless plug and say if you do want us to do a presentation at all on our cargo bike project in London Bridge, the Bikes for Business project, I'd be happy to do that for future ideas would be us.
Sounds brilliant. How about next week?
Let me check my diary. Yes, probably.
Well, there we go for the seasonal special. We'll say, because we're not all Christmas fans. All right, but it's maybe the last one of the year. We'll have to debate that at the end. All right, let's move on to our speaker now. Someone who I've known for a long time. I'm quite excited to see him again. Andrea, yeah, you there, mate? You ready to take over?
Okay, right. So I'll share the screen. Okay, so I'm doing this brief presentation on a government consultation that is actually with a deadline on Thursday, the 9th, on the establishment of a road collision investigation branch. And there are 5 parts of the presentation. First part is why why I think we need, and why does the government think that we need a road collision investigation board? What we can learn from other investigation boards in other transport sectors, how we got to the consultation, what is the proposal, and then we can discuss the various proposals. For people who don't know the work that I'm doing now, since 2015, I've been writing a blog called Vision Zero London, and basically I've been investigating various collisions around London and investigating the process or lack of process by authorities in investigating and trying to prevent deaths, similar deaths. And in my view, the majority of fatalities and serious injuries that we see are preventable, but they're not prevented because the system is broken. What we have now is that the police carries 2 sets of investigation, both a criminal investigation and an investigation how to prevent future collisions or future serious collisions. But generally, the police is not interested in the second part, and therefore the main decision on whether to do something about the way a certain junction is designed, or the lighting, or vehicle specification, etc., resides on the coroner. But the coroner is not an expert. It's not a transport expert. And finally, there is no mechanism whereby a recommendation is checked whether the transport authority or whichever authority is actually followed through from the recommendation. So basically the system is broken. People keep on dying for the same reasons. And so also we have to remember that road is the only transport sector that does not have an independent investigating body. The air there was a board established in just like 10 years after the first airplane was started flying. Rail and sea, they waited many decades, centuries, until basically some major disasters happened. So rail was the Paddington disaster, sea was the Zeebrugge disaster. And I think that it's, at this point, I like to point out something that, so what makes a successful investigation, independent investigation board is, well, independence. It needs to have the right legal powers, so the powers to investigate, and without so there's a powers which are a little bit different from the police powers, in the sense that they can investigate without having to actually to report what witnesses have said. And of course, the investigators have to be specialists, and the culture of the investigation is not to affix blame, not to find who was guilty, but really to see what can be done in future to prevent similar incidents. Now, it is true that the road transport system is quite different from the other systems because there are many more actors, many more types of vehicles involved. Also, the actors are both professional and non-professional, and there are a lot more collisions. And so there are, so basically the number of collisions, the number of actors, the number of vehicles are all challenges. And so one has to devise a board with the right characteristics. So what the government has done, basically there are two paths. One, the RAC Foundation was given £1 million to do a project and to investigate how to structure a road collision investigation board. At the same time, the Law Commission has done a serious consultation on robot vehicles and how legislation and highway code needs to be changed if we want to the introduction of robot vehicles. And so then these two strands of investigations have merged into a consultation document. The RAC has done, so they started doing this project in 2018, and they've done some preliminary reports. They issued some preliminary reports. One was to look at the international customs, and some of the recommendations there is some recommendations were to provide sufficient powers and to sort of a clear remit for the investigators. This report, this RAC report, also they've done some like case studies, and which have yielded a lot of safety learning. And what they've used, they used this as methodology, this thing called the AXI map, which is basically, it's like a matrix. So they are trying to learn lessons from various incidents. So there is a consultation document, and so the government would like to introduce a road collision investigation board, and would like to give the powers to be able to do the investigation and do basically do recommendations. The important thing is that is independent, and that these safety recommendations are followed through. And however, in order to solve the issue about the number of incidents, so as you know, there are thousands of fatalities and tens of thousands of serious injuries. So they are suggesting to have sort of a thematic approach, and the idea is really is not a vision zero approach, but more what they call the business case approach. And so to find out where are the well, the easiest fruit to pick. So where can the recommendations bear the most the biggest results? And actually I'll come to the questions, is how do you define the largest outcomes, the more, or the most preferable outcomes. So the questions are that people who want to respond to the consultations are, first of all, if one agrees to the creation, if one agrees to the responsibilities and the powers. And then they ask, what are the investigation criteria? And the document proposes so scale, risk of harm, and emerging risks. So scale is purely a quantitative number. So how to, what measures would reduce the most fatalities. A risk of harm is basically it tries to prioritize the people who are most potentially at harm, or basically that might sustain the greatest risk of harm. So children, elderly, pedestrians, people on bikes, or the horses. And the emerging risk is basically this issue about the new technologies. So, so some of the issues, okay, there is a page that is not happening, is not occurring. Okay, so some of the issues that I think should be raised are these. First of all, the consultation, the consultation document, this report was by the RAC, which has it's a car users organization. So and as we see also, for example, the experience with Vision Zero in Sweden, at the beginning, the focus was on reducing the number of deaths rather than looking at, okay, I mean, all deaths are the same, let's say, but they in Sweden first, they were not looking at really who is doing harm to whom. And so most of the measures were about intercity transport. So motorways, actually A road, the equivalent of A roads, where most of the incidents, the non-urban incidents occur. And then in Sweden, in a second stage, they started looking at urban fatalities or urban collisions, serious collisions. And then that yielded a change of really outlook and really to prioritize collisions where pedestrians and cyclists were involved. The second issue is the issue of near misses. So in the rail, for example, in rail, they look at near misses very, very carefully because they are, key indicators. And except with the work that the University of Westminster has done, there is very little work done on near misses. Certainly no government work on near misses. And so that's a major issue. And the other things is, how are these themes selected, and whether it's better to do a top-down approach, thinking of themes and then trying to study them, or looking for themes from collisions. And I think both are good and both should be done because there are a lot of lessons, and that's our experience looking at incidents in London, where just by studying one fatal incident, you can learn a lot, and you can have lessons for a lot of not just that particular junction, but for the whole transport in London. And the one other issue is this aspect of the robot cars. I think we need to be very careful that, one can be quite cynical that this can be used as an exercise to introduce legislation that puts the interest of robot car manufacturers above the interest of active travel. We all know the issue that, the fear of robot car manufacturers that if the legislation is too favorable to pedestrians, then robot cars might not be able to travel freely. And so we really have to be careful that they are not trying to shoe-in legislation that allows robot cars to injure people, so in a way that reduces the mobility of us all. That's it.
Thanks for that, Andrea. That was great. There's a few things that I want to unpack there, and I might even show a few slides and explain what the business case approach is. That's something I can add to it. But I'll go to Dave first. Dave, come on in.
Thanks. It's a topic that I've been discussing with Graham's friend John Nudell. One of the things we have is a trinity with the regulator, the investigator, and the whistleblower link. So that you have the Rail Accident Investigation Board that makes the recommendations to the ORR, who then turn that into an order to the operators to operate in that fashion. At the moment, we have a pretty disparate regulation system for roads, because it goes to the ORR for highways agency stuff, it goes to the traffic commissioner for the operator stuff. And I think we've got to try, and when we have a road accident or a highways accident investigation branch, it's got to be able to go to a regulator to say this has to be done to the way people operate, build, and look after our roads. So it needs to have that sort of trinity, with the bottom half being an independent reporting, so that whistleblowers can go into the accident investigation and say, I'm not happy with this, will you look at it? Or the regulator, I'm not happy with this, will you talk to the operators and see how it's regulated? And very much, I've worked with Andrea on some stuff, is that so many crashes are common factors. Charlie Lloyd was at the bank crash with Lee Williams's truck, and fortunately we actually had photographs from the CCTV that have been published, and the Met Police will tell you that 80% of the cycle fatalities with HGVs, the driver of the HGV hits the cyclist from the rear and they go under the front of the truck. And if we had a decent investigation system that looked at it objectively, we would be saying, why do we have trucks with a 40-centimetre gap under the front? So that when they hit somebody, they go under the wheels automatically. Instant fatality if a truck hits you from behind.
So that's an interesting one to get into, Andrea. Like your thoughts on like this group passing on instructions to engineers about the design of street. I'm a little bit worried about that personally, but I'd love to hear what you think about that. Andrea.
Your audit process, Brian.
Well, just because there's so many variables around them, the streets, and you don't want to say just do it like, because it's what street, what context, what movement, what the buildings around it. It's not just like a railway line where you go do that from now on, have this stopper. So yeah, I think if it's played right, we'll be okay. Sorry about that. Did you have any comeback to Dave's comments, Andrea? Or?
No, I think it's a very important point, and it's clearly a key thing on how the recommendations are then carried through, and whether there should be sort of legally binding recommendation or not. I don't know. I don't have a clear view. Certainly. Sorry, go ahead.
There's a couple of interesting ones, particularly in Manchester. There's just been a bus driver sacked after 34 years service because she's only 5'2", and the bus design was changed so that the assault screen support blocked her view of the near side mirror, and because she couldn't see the near side mirror on the new buses because of the way it's been constructed, she was sacked basically. And how they're producing buses where the driver can't, from the driver's seat, see down through the near side mirror. This is the whole sort of thing we need to feed into the process. I'm
with you, Dave, on like the recommended like vehicle changes and safety.
It's the audit process. Graham's friend John goes into Kingston on the 465 bus, and they've put a cycle lane that goes straight through the bus stop. Well, you have a give way line now, but he actually witnessed a crash where the bus stopped, and because the cycle route, instead of going round the back of where people get off the bus, goes straight past the door. So the passenger gets off the bus straight into the park.
78 episodes in, and we're still going to have this argument about shared bus borders, Dave. But it'll be interesting to have like a body. It'd be interesting to have a body that could unpack it. Because I've looked at the stats, and they're not unsafe, and they're not causing collisions. But yeah, but we have this new boarding. They can put us both right.
Well, the important thing is also the issue about transparency. The fact is that now there is very little transparency of what the investigations, the prevention investigations, have yielded regarding road transport. Whereas the rail investigation, they're clear, and they're clear investigations, and so that changes the culture. That then all the operators then become, what they do is out in the open, and then they, even if it's not, there's no legal requirement, there is an actual de facto requirement.
my neighbour's a pilot, and every 6 months he has to take a medical. He's a commercial airline pilot, and he can only take the medical at 2 places in the whole of Scotland. Whereas if you drive a bus or an HGV, you go to your general practitioner to sign you off for your medical every 5 years, and once you get to 65, it's every year. But you don't have a medical. There was an incident with Conway. One of their drivers passed out of the steering wheel on a site and crashed into a JCB. He was perfectly able to drive the truck, but the managing director sent him for a gold-plated, proper Nuffield type medical and found out what was wrong. She sent all of her drivers, and 30% of her drivers had to stop driving until they had remedial work done on their eyesight or their heart condition or whatever, because they had the gold-plated medical that you get when you're an airline pilot or a train driver. And that's one of the real flaws we have with HGVs.
All right, let's bring in a few different perspectives now. I'll bring in Ruth first, and then I'll go to Simon. Ruth.
Thank you. Thanks, Andrea. Very interesting. We all remember possibly Brian Dorling, who was killed about Bow Roundabout because the left turn for the lorries or cars, and he was going straight ahead. So is infrastructure going to be also a cause that will be picked on and then changed? They've just put in a very nice new cycle lane in Hounslow West, which we all like, and it's fantastic. However, it goes across what is a shopping parade, which on Sunday is constant traffic going in and out and in and out. And I can foresee that there will be a crash coming. We stood there and drivers literally ignored the cycle lane and people cycling forward. And I did bring this up on Twitter about new signage, why we can't have, new road layout signs ahead, or the kind of the Dutch one which says let op, and it shows that, and then it shows that, and it's got a red exclamation mark. So I just wondered if all those things might be part of this new going forward, please.
Well, I think that you raise a very good point and as far as what I was saying about near misses, but also about pre-misses. So how I think that the investigators should have an open line, because there are so many people that can report and say, hey, look, there's an issue here. And I think that that could also be part of their work, is to prevent accidents, not to learn lessons, not just from fatalities, but from people who can see that something serious is happening.
Yeah, I mean, and that'll be on us all to watch out to make sure that they are thinking about people walking and cycling, and it's not just like the car movement style thing. I mean, if they're looking at collisions, most of the collisions are involving vulnerable road users, so they've got to give that on board. I'll jump over to Simon. Simon, have you got?
I just a bit grumpy about the ongoing mithering about bus stop borders. Really, like we should. I think as a group, as a coalition, as a whatever we are, as an informal bunch of people, we should just be really clear about bus stop borders and the evidence base on them, and what their limitations, both good and bad, are, their pros and cons, etc. Looking at the evidence, are they dangerous? No. Are they potentially a real inclusive design issue for people who find them difficult to kind of access and feel that they're scary? Potentially. I think there's some work needs doing on that, but are they dangerous? No, not really. And I just think that we need to hammer that, because at the end of the day, there are some places, certainly in schemes we're seeing in London, where you cannot fit a bus stop bypass, and you're into all sorts of issues if you can't do borders. So yeah, I'm just like, let's stick to the facts on borders.
Well, it probably won't come under the remit.
Can I ask a question on borders? Can I ask both of you a question? So we had a meeting yesterday about the proposals on the A259 in Hove, and I won't go into the whole thing because it's complicated. But one of the issues about borders that it's Stagecoach, which is the very, very minority bus operator in Brighton. One of the issues they were talking about is not so much the border itself, but the wheelchair ramp that comes out of the door and would stick across the cycle track. And that's what they were raising as an issue for bus stop borders being a problem. I mean, you know, we had partially sighted people doing the, I think it's, can't remember, it's Ross Atkins' idea of having flashing lights and an arm coming out of the bus and all that sort of idea as well. But the serious one was what about what happens when a ramp comes out across the cycle track?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard of that before, and it's a question that you can see it, and you can see it happening, and that's what's keeping you safe. So probably bus boarders will probably never come across the radar of the Road Collision Investigation Board, because we've not had any collisions to investigate. But yeah, it's still like watching out one. But yeah, if you can see a disabled person, you can see someone deploying a ramp and stuff. Yeah, I mean, you can see it. It's the things that you can't see on the Swiss cheese of road safety that kind of take you out, isn't it? Go on, Simon, come back in.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think yet again, this just smacks of let's find reasons not to do things. You know, it's that computer says no kind of thing of like, here's this terrifying, worrying thing, when actually the problem that bus users face is never going to be that compared to all the other risks that are far bigger, etc. So I really, you know, it just doesn't seem credible in any way, shape or form. You know, if you know, Metroline had a whole stack of like papers showing bus stop deployments of, you know, ramps having been hit by cyclists or, you know, whatever, if they had a massive sheaf of evidence, I'd be like, okay, yeah, fair enough, that's really interesting and useful. I bet you they have nothing.
No one's got that. I'll bring in Roger now. I'll get us back on target.
Good evening, thank you. I'm not sure if this is a way to move forwards, but if there's a collision at the top of my road and someone unfortunately dies, and the local cycle group is obviously very concerned, doesn't matter what mode of transport they were in, nobody seems to know what happens. You know, the police do an investigation, and cycle campaign groups and motorist campaign groups and pedestrian campaign groups at the moment have to wait for the coroner. And then they go along to the inquest in about 18 months' time, and there's a report published. But there's no interaction in between. And sometimes it's probably a good idea that there isn't. But I'm just wondering if it would be useful to get different organisations together to go and look at the circumstances and actually work out amongst themselves with the road safety or road danger reduction people from the council about what could be done to prevent this in the future, if that's possible. That might be a way to get dodgy groups like the Association of British Drivers or whatever the other ones are called, to actually stand there and pick apart what happened and look at it in a forensic way of doing it. That doesn't happen. So I can see huge problems behind that, but I just wondered if that's a way forwards to actually look at the situation on the ground.
Sorry, someone called me who was quite important there, but I just got rid of them. That's like a brilliant segue though, Roger, to like a few slides I've got. I was going to explain, and there's an exercise in the I'll give Andrea a chance to come back in a minute. I've got some slides on how we actually do a collision investigation, and there's an exercise in the back of the Be a Champion manual where you can do it for yourself. I was going to show that just to show what happens next. Is that all right, Andrea? Should I move on to that, or do you want to come back on Roger's point?
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Just to get it into our heads what happens really. So I'll just show a few slides and then we can come back to the debate. Hold on, what we're doing. You think I know what I'm doing by now, wouldn't you? There we go. Just got a couple of slides that people might recognize. So just starting off really, when there is a collision investigation, the police officer comes along. This is a little bit of an old one, a stats 19 form, and he just fill in what's happened, who's gone where. So it starts with this form being filled in, which has got like the kind of causes as well. And it's also like I hope you can see my mouse, got the kind of direction, things were happening. So the police officer fills this form and then that gets logged, and then we wait, as I'm talking as a highway engineer now, for this data to come over and be available to us. And I spent a fair bit of time doing collision investigations, so I'll talk you through what happens next. And you get the kind of like lots of this data is like freely available now as well, much easier to get hold of than it was in the past. But anyway, like I've given a few examples here of the kind of like what happens to the Stats 19 form, then gets put into kind of a list. And you'll say, okay, here's all the various factors. And really the role of like a collision investigation is to spot the patterns in it. So like on the exercise of giving a Be a Champion, whatever you want to do it, I list all the collisions and all the various bits of data. And then I get people to do like an accident diagram, which is like the vehicle 1 and the vehicle 2. We normally do cyclists with a dash. I'll show you some examples. And you put the dates in there and the conditions and the reference number. And you're looking, as you plot all these things and draw them out, you're looking, are there any kind of recurring patterns that are going on there? Are they always happening when it's wet? Are they always happening when it's dark? Is there a lighting problem? Is it always hooks? Is it always straight aheads? What's going on? So just to give you a few examples of like the kind of collision diagrams we do, is like cyclists we normally represent as a dashed line. So it's useful to know. This is from like the Cycle Safety Action Plan, the kind of first one, showing the main types of collisions for cyclists. There's a collision from alongside, and we'll just draw that out. Are there lots of these shapes? The old right hook, the left hook, the dooring, the other vehicle running through the red lights. We've talked about all these and the kind of percentage of them that happens there. But really, it's these kind of diagrams that you look at, and they're all available for all the different types of diagrams. And it's a question of going through these descriptions, converting it into this kind of diagram, but then we can look at it and we can play them all against each other. And this is like a little bit of a micro way of looking at like a collision analysis. You can go down to the individual ones, or you can look at like across whole areas to see, oh wow, there's lots of collisions happening on this corridor. Something fundamentally is going wrong there. But what I do with people next when I'm training is like get them to plot all those accident diagrams on the junctions and then look for any kind of patterns. And but by all means, give this exercise a go yourself. But just to show like the street that I'm talking about and the collisions I'm talking about here, what we had, like this is Royal College Street, so Andrea will recognize this from back in the day, the kind of old versions. And when I was doing a collision investigation of this street, we had a whole batch of like basically like well, there were two main types. The driver coming in here, not seeing a cyclist coming that way, and the driver, this red car, imagine this red car here, doing a left out and not expecting a cyclist coming in this direction. That was like and they were the ones, so they were all hook collisions and they all involved cyclists, so we're spotting patterns here. And really my job was to then go down and look at the patterns and see what is it on site that would give rise to this pattern. So can you see my mouse there on the screen? My little mouse there. So I stood in that spot there, probably about 2 days in total, looking at all the drivers coming up and what they were doing and why are they not seeing cyclists. So what happened was the drivers were all coming up looking that way because it's a one-way street for cars this way, and not looking that way. They just weren't doing it. So we tried all sorts of things, stop lines, red, all sorts of businesses. Like, well, what's the fundamental issue here? Why aren't drivers expecting cyclists on this side of the road with the two-way track? So that they were the kind of patterns that emerge. And you go down and look on the street and go, the drivers aren't looking left and right. They're not looking left and right because of the two-way nature of it. What can we do to make a driver look left and right? Because then they'll anticipate it. So you start doing your interventions to try and approach it. But it's like another way of looking at collision investigation. This is like a really popular one as well. You go, okay, there's been a collision on this street. Well, how many collisions have happened? And how does that compare with the kind of norm? So on Royal College Street, in the period that I was looking at, there was like 4 collisions per kilometre for cyclists over a kind of annual period at the time I was looking. Whereas like if we look at this table here, I'm using quite old ones here, but you know, just because it used to be in a written format. But anyway, you look at the borough roads in London and how many collisions take place. We're expecting 0.15 collisions per kilometre per year. So 4 suggests that there's something way over. Now you've got to factor in the fact that it's a dedicated cycle route and lots of people are cycling there, and you know, kind of correct for those kind of things. But still, it's way over what should be expected. So when Camden did the final one, they split it to one way on either side, and so when the cars were coming up, even if they were looking at, they were seeing the cyclist and they were seeing the car. So there's a question of altering the street to match the behavior. Now, we tried everything to get a driver to look the other way, but by doing this one, you kind of remove that issue. If the driver only looks to its right, it's still going to see the cyclists, it's still going to see the cars. And then and really to tie this back into like the business case approach, you really say, okay, well, we had 4 of those per year. We reckon by this new layout, we'll probably get rid of 3 of those because that risk is mitigated for. And then you look at like there's monetary values that you can put into like the different types of collision, from the tens of thousands for a slight to the hundreds of thousands for a serious to the millions for a fatality, and go, okay, I'll save 1 fatality and I'll save 2 serious a year by doing this. Then go, okay, well, there's a 3 million annual saving. Terrible maths there now. That's a 1.5 million annual saving for society. We can do this one, and that's the kind of business case approach. So you'd look at where collisions are happening, where they're way over what you would expect. Look, is there an intervention that you can do that would bring it more in line with the average, or potentially even improve it? And that's how you kind of make a case in business case terms. So I just wanted to get that into our heads to feed into the debate. Just felt that was useful. Just that's the kind of nuts and bolts of what they'll do. Go on, Andrea.
Can I ask you, what was your role? Why were you investigating? Was it as a council officer, or and how were your lessons then propagated to all other councils?
Yeah. So yeah, that's good. So yes, I was a Camden council officer, and I was asked to look at that route because the collisions were way over the average, and they're like, sort it out or we pull it out. And at the time I was looking at, there was like the Transport for London were like, no more segregation, no more protected cycle routes because they're unsafe. And I wanted to kind of really unpack what it was that was unsafe about them. So I was asked to look at that route. I did use that route every single day that was using that, and I had to use it for the 4 years previously. So I knew it really well as well, so I can get like analytical. And in terms of passing on the knowledge of like, particularly because Camden had a lot of two-way cycle tracks and we had issues with them all, particularly at side roads. I mean, I passed that knowledge into the London Cycling Design Standards when I move over to TfL, and I do training. And like I say, I use that as an example on the training courses I do when I teach people how to do a collision analysis. Because for me, it's something that everybody in my profession anyway should know how to do. You know, like it should be like one of the fundamentals of designing the street that you do a collision analysis, because you've got to make it safer at the end of the day, particularly if you want to encourage walking and cycling. So they're the 2 main things that I did on that. So Camden asked me as a design engineer to figure it out.
If it was no Brian Deegan at the time in Camden, probably the cycle track would have been ripped out, and
arguably yes. Yeah, I mean that was the feeling at the time. So we're going back to 2012-ish, you know, where TfL's policy was not to put in protected infrastructure. So we were working against that to an extent, and there was bits of like the Tavistock one that we're trying to extend, and TfL was saying no, the collisions are way higher on this stuff. We don't need protected ones. So yeah, I mean, as a big fan of protected infrastructure, I had a vested interest because I knew it could work and it should work. We just needed to like address some of the fundamental issues. And a lot of what I learned around side roads and collisions with cyclists in Camden, I've then applied and put in the London Cycling Design Standards. And when we're doing the north, south, and east-west superhighway, made sure there were setbacks and giveways and good visibility displays for vehicles turning in, and I tried to apply that kind of knowledge. But yeah, someone else would have done the analysis, but they could have gone to, well, fundamentally, this cycle infrastructure is not safe for vehicular cycling. They should put themselves where the road are, where the cars are in the road. So that is a conclusion that could have well been made, for sure.
Yeah, so it is important then regarding the what they say, the criteria, the investigation criteria, is to have the pyramid of pedestrian, cyclists, etc., at the forefront, because otherwise you come to to conclusions that are inimical to active travel.
Yeah, and I'd like to think that's why Camden asked me to do it, because they knew I'd be particularly sensitive to the cycling stuff and they didn't want to particularly rip it all out. I'll bring Bob in because I can see him waving frantically. I'll tell you about Bob.
Yeah, quite a few things. Sorry, I was just anyway, the good news is I've just had a call from the hospital and I haven't got cancer. Yippee. Okay, so I missed out on what a few things you said, but a few points. First of all, Dave talked about the gap between the body of the HGV and tarmac as being 40 centimeters. I think with direct vision vehicles, they're about 30 centimeters, which could be different, but there is certainly a lowering. Small point. Darren wants a map of locations, and there is the TfL set up their own dashboard about a year ago, which is better for looking up stuff. Some doesn't think so, he can say back to that. About the business case thing, be wary about the values of deaths, because that is basically there as a traditional roads building thing where you say, oh, let's have a motorway because there's fewer deaths and serious injuries on them, so we can save zillions of pounds by building a motorway. There are lots of different approaches. There's Vision Zero, there's road danger reduction, the safe system, and the various ways that you intersect. And the whole point about a road danger reduction approach, which you should be doing, is it is always going back to the source of danger, which is from motor vehicular traffic. And when you look at that, you can get away from the whole business of working backwards and actually start to look at the source of things. Because the problem with working backwards is that you can have a junction where there is plainly a lot of danger for people walking and cycling, but you may not get many people killed or hurt walking or cycling because they're not there. And they're not there precisely because of that amount of danger. So you always have to be careful with that, and you always have to come back to the issues of danger and reducing danger at source. When people say Vision Zero, they often mean lots of different things, because there are different Vision Zeros in America and Sweden and so on. And we always have to press for, it's got to be road danger reduction. You've got to be talking about what the users of motor vehicles are doing. You've got to reduce speeds to below 20, primarily for pedestrians. And also you have to bring in law enforcement, because there are loads and loads of different ways in which cyclists can get hurt or killed. So that was basically it. I don't know, did I get something wrong about TfL dashboard, Simon?
No, you're all good. I'll bring Simon in a minute, but just shout out to Beyond Vision Zero in Sweden. That's
oh yeah,
what looking out for.
Beyond Vision Zero is where you change it yet again, because the point is, if you have someone, because what you look at then is you get away from the whole victim thing. Remember the work I did with PACTS on, you're talking about the vehicles involved when other people get, you don't look at it's not victim centered, it's at the dangerous vehicle centered. And then you go even further into Beyond Zero, where you talk about the health benefits of cycling. So you end up with, instead of cycling being this dangerous thing you do because you get hurt or killed, cycling and to a lesser extent walking are the best modes of transport, because you actually live longer than any other form of transport. So, and you know, if you wanted to get on the cost benefit analysis, but you then have a problem that the value of a life saved by being healthier is going to be a lot less than the values of lives lost according to conventional analysis. So you could get screwed on that one. That would be my concern.
All right, I'm going to let Andrea chew that over while I bring Simon in.
Yeah, I was just going to say
to you, Dave.
I was just going to say two quick things. One is bike data, I think, is much better than TfL, certainly. Mark Strong in the comments also put crash map. But both bike data and crash map enable you to do multiple years, which if you're talking road safety and trying to spot collision patterns and things like that, doing 1 year of like data, which is all the TfL's mapping, gives you 1 year at a time. Doing multiple years at a time gives you a much better insight into patterns very quickly. The bike data, Cycle Street's mapping also covers the whole of, I suspect, the UK, certainly more than London, and gives you full Stats 19 reports on each collision. So if you want to go in and click in on a collision, you can read all of the turning movements and all of the contributing factors, and whether it was daylight or night or whatever. So again, I think it's a really powerful tool. I use it all the time to look at road danger. The other thing, and I'm sure Brian's going to come in on this one, is that economic benefits and health. I did the cycle design course that Brian ran for a while for TfL a few years ago. It was brilliant, and TfL used to just do loss of life for economic impact and congestion costs, and then added health using the WHO heat tool or variant of that, and it totally changes the game in terms of the balance of schemes, the economic impacts. So because while collisions are very rare, health impacts are for every single person who walks along a scheme who would have previously driven, or every single person who cycles along a scheme who would have previously driven. They gain the health benefits. So health can add up really quickly as a good economic argument for schemes. But I'm sure Brian knows this far better than I do.
No, it's great to hear other people say. And thanks for the bike data. I was trying to remember the name of it while I was talking, but the brain went blank there. I'll bring Dave in, and then Andrea, I'll come to you for like a bit of final commentary on it. Dave.
Thanks, Brian. You'll find there's pictures of me at the truck shows and the clocks shows trying to slide under trucks. And Robert's right, there is lower, but there's a tendency for construction industry people to buy off-road or N3G trucks rather than the N3. And they're high ground clearance, macho trucks that people like to climb up into a high cab on. And most of those are at least 40 centimetre gap. You only get lower down when you get delivery trucks. And you're right, I think the typical Iconic cab is about 30 centimetres. The lowest you'll get is probably about 15 to 20, but you'll still get people going under that on a bus and being killed by going under a bus. So it's quite critical. I'll hit section 39 because the councils are supposed to investigate, and Andrea has done quite an interesting review of London Council's quality of work to investigate crashes. Is the best way of putting that. It's appalling, and I think that needs to be picked up on. And was it Wookie just said something about the Cambridge busway, which is a black hole because it's a busway and a private road. So it's actually health and safety executive who won't touch it, and the roads people won't touch it because it's not a road. So we've had a person killed there and waiting on the inquest. So we need that. And section 28, where people asked, could we have avoided killing? Vernon Place, it took more than just a section 28 to ban the left turn. That's where that's the sort of thing.
All right. Cheers, Dave. I'm going to pass over to Andrea now to kind of finish off this section. We'll go to Ruth then for last words. Yeah, really interesting stuff, Andrea.
Well, thank you, Robert. Bob, I totally agree with what you say. And so the road danger reduction is the primary goal, let's say, or the primary motivator for policy. And I think that so Vision Zero means that with the environment that we build is how do we learn lessons from the mistakes that we make, as designers and as users, and without blaming the users and without blaming the designers, but having the opportunity to tell designers, listen, this doesn't work. Exactly what Brian was doing. So he went there and says, hey, something is not working here. What lessons can we learn? How can we make this better? But paramount is to allow active travel to flourish without the dangers that other users can cause. And so I think personally, I agree, and I think that should be. I urge you to respond to the consultation, and I think that is the main message to to provide back, to say that it is very important to have an independent investigator because all these deaths, a lot of these deaths are preventable, and so it is a good thing, but it should not be the primary mover for lower death rates. The primary mover should be promoting active travel, and so the investigator is there to help us always improving the system so that active travel can flourish.
Yeah, that was brilliant. I'm totally with you there. Yeah, so best of luck to this new body. They're going to make sure that they live by those ideals. Wow, fantastic. I'll move over to Ruth now to do the kind of final word. But yeah, great session. Ruth.
Thank you. Can I have a bit more than a final word, though?
You can have a final 4 minutes. How about that?
Oh, thanks. So Kew Bridge, I was able to secure a site meeting with TfL. Now, Kew Bridge, for any of you who aren't Londoners, is a spectacular bridge over the river going from Chiswick to Richmond, also links Ealing and beyond down to Richmond, Twickenham and beyond, and is one of the major crossings of the river. Cycleway 9, which is fantastic, which we've got going east, has made it incredibly safe getting out of Chiswick to get on towards the bridge. And we know that, you may have read that in Richmond, Kew Road now has got no parking alongside Kew Gardens, and there are protected wand cycle lanes, which we hope one day might be permanent. But in between, you've got Kew Bridge, which is an unmitigated disaster. One's told not to be critical, but it is so dangerous, it's not true. It is 4 lanes of very fast moving traffic. I remember when they put a bus lane in, which was very successful going from south to north, but the antis, in the same way that they objected to the bus lane on the A4M4 flyover, said it created more traffic, so they got rid of it. And I would liken that to taking your hand out of a bucket of water and the hole that's left, well, we all know what happens. Kew Bridge is a link between, as I said, Chiswick and Richmond. It's 2-3 flat miles, perfectly walkable or cyclable. An awful lot of people take their children to school there. I've been raising this ever since they took away some of the west pavement, which was shared use, leaving only the eastbound pavement, east side pavement, which is shared use, but it's got bus stops on it. You get a lot of tourists who stop and look at the view. So anyway, we got a meeting, and I also, in the meantime, wrote to Caroline Russell, who was a Green LA member for transport, and she passed me on to Sean Berry. It was brought up 2 years ago, nearly 3, 2019, before spades were put in the ground, that this was going to be a disaster and that something needed to be done. It was ignored. Sean and Alex Ingram, her assistant, are taking it up. I got Nick Roger, who is our new LA member, to come and have a look. At the meeting, I had parents with children at Kew School because it's very popular. They do risk going to it with their cargo bikes, and they do cycle on the pavement. During the summer months, children are at risk of being pushed off the pavement onto the road because there simply is not enough room. I have good contacts at TfL myself. We had the sponsor came along, and we had one of our local engagement people, and she was very, very nice. But she wrote back to me, and they said to me on the day, changes such as introducing a protected cycle lane will be difficult due to the impact on traffic. Well, we know that Hammersmith Bridge is closed, but it wasn't closed at the time when this decision was made. And the problem is the traffic will be increasing and increasing because the people who might cycle, walk the 2 flat miles, 3 flat miles to school, to the shops, to Kew Gardens, to the retail place, simply won't do it because it's too dangerous and too horrible. This noise pollution alone is horrendous. And the fact is that if TfL is still using impact on traffic without considering impact on health, impact on school children, impact on the right to cycle or the right to walk safely, then it's going horribly wrong. And, you know, I'm sorry, I'm so angry about this. We're not allowed to criticize, but you have to be critical because it is a disaster. We're now at the point where there is no money. And yet it is an eyesore. It's I can't think of the terminology for what Kew Gardens is, one of you will tell me. And the fact is that health-wise, people are being impacted upon, especially children. It's surrounded by schools on both sides of the river. I know my own road, I've just taken over Neighbourhood Watch, and nearly half my neighbours send their children there because it's in a good, you know, catchment area for that school. Some of them are still driving in their 4x4s. Some of them drive up Gunsbury Avenue, their 4x4s, to go to the international school because it is simply too dangerous to tackle walking or cycling. And somebody, I can't remember because I'm so angry, you know, it's not in the data because people aren't walking or cycling. Therefore, it's not seen that there is crashes or accidents, as they're called, but you know, the health outcomes are very poor. I don't know how we go forward on this. I'm sure all you experts must know that a road with 4 lanes of traffic, which are going at 40 miles an hour, because it rises to a peak in the middle and then they all go down very fast. And off-peak is more dangerous than peak. And I'm pretty feisty, and even I am frightened now of cycling over it, especially in the winter months and especially in the poor weather. There must be regulations about whether you allow people to cycle with such heavy goods traffic at the same time. And the letter I got back 3 months ago said that TfL have decided that we can take the lane. Now, I know I've brought this up before, but you cannot take the lane with a child. You cannot take the lane as an elderly person on a heavier bike or a shopping bike. It just is wrong. Westminster Bridge has now got protected cycle lanes. Southwark Bridge has, various of the other ones. Why is it in the west of London we're not getting the same? And, you know, I'm at the last word and you listen to me and you're all very good, but I think this has to be discussed going forward and not just left to people like me to go and stand on that bridge and bang the drum. So you can come back, Brian.
Yeah, like, yeah, no, I've spent a fair bit of time discussing that bridge in my career, and yeah, I mean there is shared use on the kind of eastern side of it, but yeah, admittedly, that even puts you in a worse position when you come to the junction of as to what to do. Yeah, many have tried, and I've been involved in quite a few designs of that bridge junction over the years, and yeah, I mean, would love to have another go at it. I'll press some buttons, but yeah, maybe we can do a kind of design workshop at it. But you know, it's a question like something's got to give, and you know, it's got to give in West London as it is in East London. Go on, Simon, come in and save me from saying anything.
Well, very, very quickly there, can I just add, obviously with the football stadium, that is increasing the footfall. I mean, you know, we've got the football stadium, which has rugby as well, and all the new schools going up, and they've just given agreement to B&Q to be developed on Chiswick Roundabout. So the footfall is immense, and there is nowhere for all these cars to go. Something has to give.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I was just going to say, you know, like there's an ongoing discussion, isn't there, in London about network assurance and modelling of private car impacts and all that kind of stuff that we're fighting the fight on. What I was going to say, and Cubridge is an obvious example of where there's a real weak point in a scheme, and there should be something far better. What I was going to say was, Ruth keeps talking about kind of you can't criticise or you can criticise or you've got to be critical. I'm wondering whether at some point it's worth, because I think this is a really complicated area and an area of kind of almost artistic nuance. Is it worth me coming back at some point and talking about my view on how to be a critical friend? And when to be critical and when to be friend.
Do you want to do that next week? We're sorting out next year's program.
I don't know.
Okay, but with respect, we all said at the consultation that it wasn't going to work, and we've accepted the stuff that has gone in, and we've been as positive about the really, really good stuff of Cycleway 9. But if the bridge is a failure, then Cycleway 9 and Kew Road and the link between Chiswick and Richmond will fail. because everyone will be able to say, look, the take-up is poor. Statistically, the take-up is poor. And you can frown as much as you like, Simon, but the point is, if it's dangerous, it's dangerous. And I'm out there on it every day.
On C9, 4,000 cyclists a day on C9.
Not across Kew Bridge.
But you cannot say the scheme is a failure. It's a massive raging. Yeah, of course it isn't. It's rubbish across Kew Bridge. Well, no one's denying that.
We definitely should have left it at last word, but I think it's, you know, like all things of ideas with beers, like if we hit a hot topic, I'd rather we deep dived it and had a look at the whole thing and properly. So you've raised the hot topic, and we can cover junction design again. And you know, I'd like to have a go at playing a Cyclops card on that bad boy one of these days, but we'll see about that. Let's call it a day for this week with us all. Like it's been a tense one and brilliant, and thanks to Andrea and Bob and a great discussion. And we'll come back next week, and I think Lee's going to talk about cargo bikes. That's all good, and maybe Simon will be ready, and we'll sort something else out as well. All right, excellent. Have a good week, everybody.
Thank you.
If you want a literal last word, I've got to give it you just for the tradition.
Yes, I've nearly got to my target of 6,500 miles for this year cycling, but this COVID is kind of going to kibosh it, sadly.
Take care of yourself, and we'll see you next week.
Take care, Ruth.
Oh, and amazing, Bob.
Yes.
Yeah, well done, Bob. Yeah.